judge looked at my daughter across the courtroom and didn't say a word for a long moment, just looked at her. Then she looked at my daughter's husband. Then she looked back down at the papers in front of her, and I watched her jaw tighten in a way that told me everything I needed to know before she spoke a single word. "Mr. Calloway," she said finally, "you're telling this court that your father-in-law is mentally unfit to manage his own finances. Is that correct?" My son-in-law, Brendan, shifted in his seat. His lawyer leaned over and whispered something, but Brendan brushed him off and stood up anyway. "Your Honor, we're concerned about some decisions he's been making recently. Decisions that don't reflect sound judgment." "Decisions," the judge repeated, flat, letting the words sit there. "Yes, Your Honor. He's been redirecting assets, changing documents. We believe he may be under undue influence from whom? His home care worker." The judge looked at me then. I was sitting beside my lawyer, David Park, who had driven up from Mississauga on a Tuesday morning just for this. I gave the judge a small nod. She looked back at Brendan. Mr. Calloway, how long has your father-in-law been providing you and your wife with financial support?" Silence. "I'll ask again. How long?" Brendan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we don't see the relevance." "Sit down, counselor. I'm establishing context." She turned back to Brendan. "How long?" "About 4 years," Brendan said quietly. "And what form did that support take?" More silence. "The kind that fills a room." David slid a document across to my lawyer's table copy, and my lawyer passed the summary to the clerk without making a show of it. The judge reviewed it for less than a minute. "According to the financial records filed by the petitioner's own legal team," she said, "Mr. Gerald Calloway provided his daughter and son-in-law with monthly e-transfers totaling $4,000, paid the down payment on their home in Burlington, contributed $62,000 toward renovations over 18 months, and co-signed a vehicle lease for a 2022 Audi Q5. She paused. "Does that sound approximately correct?" "Yes," Brendan said. "And when Mr. Calloway was admitted to Hamilton General Hospital following a fall on the ice in February, what did you and your wife do?" I didn't need to hear Brendan's answer. I already knew what had happened. I'd been there. My hip had been fractured in 2 places. I was 67 years old, lying in a hospital bed in the middle of a Canadian February, and my daughter had sent me a text, not a call, a text. "Dad, we're already in Cancun. Flight just landed. I'm so sorry. The resort has a no-refund policy. We'll come by when we get back. Love you." I had read that text 4 times. Then I'd set my phone face down on the tray table beside my hospital bed and looked out the window at the gray Hamilton sky for a long time. "We were traveling," Brendan said. "We had a pre-planned trip. Non-refundable." "Non-refundable," the judge said again, the same way she'd said decisions, like she was tasting it and finding it lacking. "Your father-in-law fractured his hip. He had surgery. He was alone in hospital for 9 days, and you did not come back. We offered to help when we returned. That was 2 weeks later. Yes, and now you're in this courtroom asking me to declare him mentally incompetent because he stopped sending you $4,000 a month." She closed the folder. "I want to be very clear about what I am looking at. I'm looking at a competent adult who provided his family with substantial financial support for 4 years, who needed help after a serious injury, who was left alone, and who then made the entirely rational decision to stop subsidizing people who treated him as an afterthought. That is not incompetence. That is consequence." She looked at their lawyer with an expression that I imagine gave him significant pause. "This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering the petitioners to cover Mr. Calloway's legal costs in defending this proceeding. My clerk will confirm the amount, but based on what I've seen, you should expect it to be in the range of $8,000 to $10,000, payable within 45 days. She picked up her pen. "I'd also like to note for the record that the medical affidavit submitted in support of this petition contains characterizations that are, at best, irresponsible. I will be reviewing whether a referral to the College of Physicians is appropriate." The gavel came down. Brendan's lawyer was already gathering his papers before the echo faded. My daughter, who had been sitting on the other side of the room in a cream blazer, with her hair done like she was attending a luncheon, stood up and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not even hatred, Something more like bewilderment, like she genuinely could not understand what had just happened. I looked back at her for a moment. Then I looked away. David shook my hand in the hallway. He is a careful, precise man who doesn't say much more than necessary, which is part of why I trust him. That went about as well as it could have, he said. The legal costs. Will they actually pay? That's the interesting part. He tucked his briefcase under his arm. Based on what I've been able to find out, they've been carrying a fairly significant line of credit for the past 8 months. Their checking account isn't exactly robust. If they don't pay within the 45 days, we have options: wage garnishment, property lien. The court order is enforceable. I nodded. We walked to the elevator. My home care worker, a woman named Audrey who had been coming 3 mornings a week since I'd left rehab, was waiting in the parking lot in my Subaru. She's in her late 50s, matter of fact, originally from Newfoundland, and she makes very good tea. She had driven me to the courthouse that morning because my hip still wasn't fully reliable on icy pavement, and I hadn't wanted to navigate the parking garage alone. She looked up from her phone when I came out. Well? Dismissed, I said. Good. She put her phone away and started the car. Seats warm. We drove back to my house in Ancaster without much conversation. I watched the escarpment go by, the bare trees, a Tim Hortons drive-through with a line snaking into the street. By the time we pulled into my driveway, my phone had 17 missed calls, all from my daughter. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I put the phone in my coat pocket and went inside. Audrey made tea. I sat in the kitchen and listened to the voicemails on speaker, not because I wanted to, but because I thought I should know what I was dealing with. The first 3 were controlled, almost reasonable. Dad, call me back. We need to talk about this. The 4th one was less controlled. By the 9th one, she had started crying, or at least performing crying well enough that I couldn't tell the difference. By the 14th, she was saying things I won't repeat. Things that I never expected to hear from someone I had held as a newborn, sat up with through ear infections and nightmares, driven to school for 12 years, and paid $4,000 a month for the last 4 years without ever once being asked to explain why. I deleted them. I saved copies to a folder David had told me to create for documentation. Then I sat with my tea and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, where my old workshop light was still on because I'd forgotten to turn it off that morning. I had a cedar canoe back there. I'd been building it for 2 years, on and off, when my hip would allow it. It was nearly done, ribs all set, planking almost complete. I'd been planning to take it up to Georgian Bay in the summer. I thought about that for a while. About the canoe and the bay in the summer, which was still 3 months away but would come eventually, the way things do. My granddaughter called me 3 days later. She's 14, her name is Lily, and she is the only person in this entire situation who has behaved with any grace whatsoever. Grandpa. Her voice was small. Mom's really upset? I know, sweetheart. She says you did something unfair in court. What do you think? A pause. I think I don't really understand what's happening. But I don't think you're a bad person. I'm not. And neither is your mom, not at the core. She's just made some choices that she's going to have to think about for a while. She cried all last night. I looked at the ceiling. Are you safe? Is anyone taking care of you? Dad ordered pizza. I'm fine. Another pause. Grandpa, why did you stop paying them money? It's a strange thing having to explain the architecture of your own grief to a 14-year-old. I thought about how to do it honestly without making her feel like she had to choose a side. You know I fell on the ice in February, I said. Yeah. I was alone in the hospital for a long time, and the people I expected to be there weren't. That changed things for me. It had to. Oh. Quiet. Then I would have come. If I wasn't in school, I would have come. I know you would have. You're a good kid, Lily. None of this is about you. Can I still come for March break? Absolutely. We'll work on the canoe. I heard her exhale. Okay, good. The weeks after the hearing were quieter than I expected. No visits, no letters, just the occasional call from a number I didn't recognize, which I didn't answer. David kept me updated through his own channels. The legal costs hadn't been paid. The 45-day deadline was coming. Through the same channels, I learned that Brendan had been passed over for a promotion he'd apparently been counting on, that the Audi had been returned, they'd been 2 payments behind, that there were conversations happening in their household that were loud enough for the neighbors to notice. I didn't feel triumphant about any of it. That's the part people don't tell you about cutting off financial support to someone you love. The satisfaction you're supposed to feel doesn't quite arrive, or it arrives mixed with something else, something more complicated, because you're watching a person you raised in a house you paid for, in a life you helped build, come apart at the seams. And even if they earned every bit of it, you're not made of stone. I went to the workshop most evenings after dinner. The canoe was good company. Cedar doesn't ask anything of you. You just have to show up and be patient and do the work correctly. Audrey would bring coffee out sometimes and sit on the old stool by the door. She never offered opinions unless I asked for them, which I appreciated. One evening in early March, she said, "You know, you're allowed to be angry. I know, you don't act like it." "I'm angry at the situation," I said. "I'm not sure I'm angry at her. She didn't get this way on her own. I didn't set things up the way I should have a long time ago." Audrey thought about that. "You can admit that and still be right about the court thing." "I knew that too." My daughter called one Sunday afternoon in late March from a number I didn't have saved but recognized as her mother-in-law's landline. I picked up because I was curious and because some part of me had been waiting. "Dad." Her voice sounded different, flattened out, like something had been pressed out of it. "How are you?" "Not great." A pause. "Brendan and I are having some problems." I didn't say anything. I waited. We've been fighting a lot. About money, about the court thing, about what happened in February. Another pause. "He said some things about you that I didn't like. That I should have said something about sooner, a long time ago sooner." "What things?" "He said, when you first fell, he said you were probably exaggerating. That you always made everything about getting attention. He'd been saying things like that for a couple of years, actually. Whenever you called, whenever you came up in conversation, just little comments. I didn't realize how much I'd started to believe them until I was in that courtroom and I saw the way the judge looked at me and I thought..." She stopped. "I thought, this is not who I wanted to be." I set down the piece of sandpaper I'd been holding. The workshop was very quiet. "Dad, I'm not asking you to give us money. I know that's done. I'm not asking for forgiveness either, because I don't think I've earned it. I just wanted to say that I understand what I did, and that I'm sorry, and that I know sorry doesn't come close to fixing it." I looked at the canoe, at the hull taking shape under the workshop lights, the cedar planking smooth and honest and exactly what it was supposed to be. How long has Brendan been talking about me that way? At least 3 years, maybe longer. A small sound, not quite a laugh. "He had me believing you were this fragile, difficult person who couldn't handle being told no, and the truth is you were just asking for basic things, for me to show up, for me to call back, for me to come to the hospital when my father was injured. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I finally told him to leave." The silence stretched between us, across however many kilometers of Ontario, between her apartment in Burlington and my house in Ancaster. "He's moved out. 3 weeks ago. I needed some time before I called you. I didn't want to call you because I needed something. I wanted to call you because it was the right thing to do." I believed her. I wasn't sure why, but I did. "Where's Lily?" "With me. She's good. Better than I expected. She asked me the other day why I had waited so long to be honest with Grandpa." "Smart kid. She really is." My daughter's voice caught slightly. "Dad, I know you might not want to see me. I know I don't have any right to ask. But if there was ever a point where you thought you might want to, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I picked up the sandpaper again, set it back down. "Come by next Sunday," I said. "Bring Lily. We'll have lunch. No discussion of money, no discussion of the court, no discussion of Brendan, except as it relates to Lily's arrangements. Just lunch. Can you do that? A long pause. Yes. Good. She arrived at 20 past noon with Lily and a grocery bag containing, of all things, a frozen buttered chicken from the grocery store and a loaf of good sourdough from a bakery on Lock Street that I'd liked for years. It was such a normal thing to bring, so ordinary. I had to look away for a second when I opened the door. Lily came in first and hugged me immediately, the way teenagers sometimes do when they've been worrying about something and the worry finally releases. My daughter stood on the doorstep with the grocery bag and looked at me and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say yet that hadn't already been said, and we both knew it. I stepped back. Come in. It's cold. We ate at the kitchen table. Lily talked about school, about a geography project on the Canadian Shield, about a friend of hers who had gotten a border collie puppy. My daughter ate quietly and listened and occasionally said something small. I watched her when she didn't know I was watching, trying to find the daughter I remembered under 4 years of Brendan's erosion. She was still there, thinner, more careful with her words, but still there. After lunch, I took Lily to the workshop to show her the canoe. She ran her hand along the hull the way kids do when something impresses them and they don't know quite what to say about it. You built all of this yourself? Most of it. Took me a while. What wood is this? Cedar. It's light, good on the water. Are you actually going to use it? Georgian Bay this summer. You can come if you want. She looked up. Are you serious? If your mother agrees and the logistics work out, yes, I'm serious. Lily looked back at the canoe with an expression that reminded me, for a second, of her at age 4, looking at her first Christmas tree, complete and uncomplicated wonder. It had been a while since I'd seen that. My daughter had followed us to the workshop door. She was standing with her arms crossed against the March cold, watching Lily touch the cedar ribs with careful fingers. It's beautiful, Dad, she said, quietly, not performing. It's getting there, I said. Still some work to do. I wasn't only talking about the canoe, and we both knew that too. The court-ordered costs were never paid within the 45-day window. David moved on the wage garnishment, which was uncomfortable for everyone but legally straightforward. Brendan fought it for about 2 weeks through his lawyer and then gave up. By May, the amount had been recovered in full. My daughter had started working full-time again, something she'd stopped doing 3 years into the marriage when Brendan had discouraged it in the subtle, persistent way he apparently discouraged many things. She was working in HR for a logistics company in Hamilton. $43,000 to start, which wasn't lavish but was hers, and she said that made a difference she hadn't anticipated. She paid me back $4,000 in April, unsolicited, an e-transfer with a note that said only first installment. I know it doesn't cover it. I just needed to start. I sat with my phone for a long time after I saw that. Then I called David and told him to set up an education account in Lily's name and that I'd be contributing to it directly, outside of any other arrangements. He said he'd draft the paperwork. I didn't tell my daughter about the account. I told Lily, at Easter, when she came with her mother for dinner. I told her it was for university or a trade program or whatever she decided she wanted to do, and that it was between her and me, and she didn't need to report it to anyone. Lily said, "Grandpa," in a tone that wasn't quite embarrassed and wasn't quite grateful and was mostly just overwhelmed, and then she went back to her dinner and didn't say anything else about it, which was exactly the right response. June came. The canoe was finished in the second week of the month. I'd been working on it in the evenings after the hip started to allow longer standing, and on the Saturday I set the final coat of varnish. I stood back and looked at what I'd built for a long time. Audrey was there. She'd brought coffee again, as she sometimes did now, even on days that weren't her scheduled shifts. We'd become, over the months, something closer to friends than employer and employee, though neither of us had officially said so. "Well," she said. "Well," I agreed. "She's done. She's done." We looked at it together for a moment. "Are you ready for Georgian Bay?" she asked. "I think so." "And the other thing? Your daughter?" I thought about Sunday lunches, about Lily's border collie stories, about an e-transfer that arrived on the 1st of every month now, $400 instead of $4,000, which was not about the money, but about the intention. About my daughter sitting across from me at the kitchen table last week and laughing, genuinely laughing, at something I'd said, and how strange and good it had felt to hear that sound again. "We're not done," I said. "There's still a lot to repair. I don't know if we get all the way back to what we were before, or if that's even the right goal, but we're working on it." Audrey nodded. "That's something, it's something," I agreed. I carried the canoe out to the yard alone, because I wanted to, because I'd built it alone, and it seemed right. I set it down in the grass and stood back and looked at it in the late afternoon light. 35 years ago, I had learned to build cedar strip canoes from my own father in a garage in Sudbury on winter weekends, and I had never done it until now. I don't know what had stopped me, exactly. Life, probably. The particular kind of busy that convinces you there will be time later. There is a version of the last 4 years in which I kept writing the checks and telling myself it was generosity, and my daughter kept drifting further away, and I never noticed until it was too late. I came close to that version. I had one foot in it for a long time. What I know now, on the other side of a courtroom and a fractured hip and a lot of evenings in a cold workshop, is that the most useful thing I ever did for my daughter wasn't paying for anything. It was stopping. Some people mistake that for cruelty. The judge didn't, Lily doesn't. And slowly, carefully, a Sunday at a time, I don't think my daughter does either. The canoe looked good in the June light, solid and true and built to last. I went back inside to call Lily about Georgian Bay. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the courtroom, not the voicemails, not even the text from Cancun. It's a quieter moment than any of those. It's me sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, listening to Audrey move around in the next room and realizing that for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't afraid of my own phone. I think about what I enabled, and I have to be honest about it the way you have to be honest about a joint you cut wrong. You can see exactly where it went sideways, and pretending otherwise doesn't help the structure. I had spent years confusing financial generosity with love, and I had let my daughter confuse them too. Every transfer I sent was, in some part, me buying reassurance that the relationship was intact. It wasn't. It was just quiet. There's a difference. What changed things wasn't the accident itself. It was the text. The resort has a no-refund policy. I'd given that family over $200,000 across 4 years, and in the moment that actually mattered, I was worth less than a hotel booking fee. Some truths arrive gently. That one didn't. But here's what I've learned, and I mean learned the way you learn things that cost you something. The people who treat you like a resource will always find a way to justify it. Brendan had been building that justification for years, quietly, in small comments, in the steady work of making my daughter see me as fragile and demanding rather than as her father. That's not weakness on her part. It's what prolonged exposure to a certain kind of person does. The mind adjusts. The heart follows. It took a courtroom and a judge with very little patience for nonsense to interrupt that pattern, and even then, the interruption was only the beginning. What I'm proudest of, and I don't use that word lightly, is that I didn't act out of anger. I acted out of clarity. There is a meaningful difference between those two things. Anger makes decisions that feel good for a week. Clarity makes decisions you can live with for the rest of your life. Stopping the transfers wasn't revenge. It was the first honest thing I'd done in that relationship in years. It said, "This is what I will and will not accept." It said, "I know my own worth, even if you've forgotten it." Lily knew. A 14-year-old understood something that took the adults in her life considerably longer to figure out. That's not nothing. When I set up her education fund, I wasn't doing it as a statement or a gesture. I was doing it because she had shown me, in small and consistent ways, what integrity looks like when it hasn't been worn down yet. You protect that where you find it. And my daughter, I watch her now, working, paying her own bills, sending me $400 a month, not because I need it, but because she needs to. And I see someone doing the hard, unglamorous work of becoming herself again. That takes a kind of courage that doesn't get celebrated much. It's not dramatic. It's just showing up. Sunday after Sunday, and being honest and not flinching from what you've done. The canoe is on Georgian Bay this summer. The relationship is somewhere in the middle of being rebuilt, slowly, the way you rebuild anything worth keeping. I don't know how it ends. I just know I'm not a doormat anymore. And I'm not a bank, and I'm not fragile. I'm a man who built a cedar canoe from scratch at 67 years old after a fractured hip, and watched his family find out that love is not the same thing as money, and chose, at the end of it, to leave a door open anyway. That's enough. That's more than enough.